similar stories across everyone's presentation. And one thing that I've really been struck with is just survival. You know, and I feel like a lot of what artists do, and it's not just artists, I think we're kind of going to a point now where with labor and stuff that we all are trying to figure out how to survive. So yes, this is about kind of art, but it's also an artist, but I think it also is something that like touches us all. Recently I've been reading this book by Jonathan Crary called 24/7, and it's really talking about labor practices in the 21st century. And so that sort of was in my mind kind of running into this talk. And I just want to read a short segment of that, and then I can just talk about me, my career, and where I've landed. So the name of the book is 24/7, and he's sort of looking at how like time cycles now, and how there's this relentless urge for all of us to work all the time. And he also talks about sleep as being sort of a kind of resistance to that. So he says, 24/7 is a time of indifference, against which the fragility of human life is increasingly inadequate, and within which sleep has no necessity or inevitability. In relation to labor, it renders plausible, even normal, the idea of working without pause, without limits. It is aligned with what is inanimate, inert, or unaging. As an advertising extortion, it decrees the absoluteness of availability, and hence the ceaselessness of needs and their incitement, but also their perpetual non-fulfillment. The absence of restraints on consuming is not simply temporal. We are long past an era in which mainly things were accumulated. Now our bodies and identities assimilate an ever-expanding surfeit of services, images, procedures, chemicals to a toxic and often fatal threshold. So when I talk about survival, it's real, you know, and I think that like artists are trying to find a way in the world, but I think where we're going to go in the next 20 years is everyone working all the time. And anyway, so what am I working all the time on? I didn't even talk about that. I'm doing a PhD at NYU in comparative literature, and I'm also assistant curator of visual arts at UW Center for the Arts. And I've done a ton of things in my life up to this point. So maybe I should bring you into where I work. This is what I look at all the time, speaking of working all the time. So I have my computer at home and my computer at the office. I'm not an artist, so I'm probably like very different from a lot of people here. I can identify really as a curator, as an academic, and as a writer. So I kind of come to art in a very different kind of perspective in that way. And maybe, you know, I have a more colorful working space. I love looking at all the studios and stuff that you guys have. So how did I get here? What am I doing, and what is this about? I grew up in the East Bay. I was born in Oakland, and I first got interested in art really by being involved with the punk and music scene here. And I think, you know, going to 94 Gilman as like a teenager really revealed to me that like art can happen anywhere, it can happen anywhere, and it doesn't need this sort of institutional support to happen. I went to school, I used to Berkeley for undergrad, I studied history and sociology. In my last year of school, I got really into media theory, and that was just like something that totally shifted my perspective. I moved to New York after I graduated with no idea about what I was going to do, if I was going to work in the arts, if I was going to work in technology, I had no idea. I ended up landing a job as a special projects coordinator at the New Museum, which was sort of a catch-all for a bunch of different positions. I was working at art fairs. I was selling basically editions for the New Museum as a fundraiser, so I was doing like sort of development, marketing. And then I did that for a few years, and then I was working for the New Museum in Rhizome, which is a really amazing art and technology organization. And then I was hired as a senior editor of Rhizome, which was really like an amazing experience. And both Rhizome and the New Museum are both really incredible places. And I think that to just being there, I was there during a major transition when we moved into a big building. The work that went into that was really important to me. But I also, especially through Rhizome, I got to meet a lot of really great artists, but a lot of artists who are working between art and technology, and so many artists I know who kind of have found that field. Again, going back to survival, a lot of them work also as coders, also in tech as their day job, and then are also practicing artists. So it's a very different kind of model than someone who's producing like sculpture or doing printmaking, even though some of those artists were doing that as well. And I would you know, I was writing a lot, and I still continue to write a lot. I still continue to write for Rhizome. I also write for Artforum and The Wire, and a lot of my writing really has to do with what I started this talk out about, just like thinking about the 21st century, thinking about technology, thinking about sort of critical theory and where we are now. I also, for years, I spent a year teaching like philosophy classes at NYU too, as part of my PhD program, which was really interesting. And then now, last fall, I started working, and I moved back out here after being in New York for 7 years at, and working as a curator for WebECA, and I'm starting a new exhibition series next year called Control that is looking at the role of technology in culture. So again, kind of coming back to these big picture questions about how technology is changing our lives, how it's changing our, you know, our notion of time, experience of time, how it's, you know, affecting health services, how it's affecting every aspect of our lives. And, you know, looking back at sort of the trajectory that I've had, it's sort of, you know, similar to a lot of these other stories where I just kind of have followed my intuition and followed my instinct, and I've really just done what I love and what I think is really important in this world, and things have kind of, thankfully or luckily, have fallen into place for me. But I think for working artists, I think the reality, and it's not just, again, as I started this talk, I don't think it's just about artists, I think it's for all of us that we just have to like think about precarity as something that we live with, and survival is something that we do to, you know, exist. Anyway,